Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the idea of rules. Now, rules, regulations, laws, clearly codified, contracts where each party has their responsibilities and obligations based on the agreement reflected in the contract and so on. Now, I've noticed there's been a lot of slippage over the years, particularly since the globalists took control, because clearly codified rules and laws inhibit and prevent and slow down the imposing of the globalist project. So they want to, and have been, removing the idea and getting rid of laws. They're just pesky impediments to them imposing their projects. There's kind of a wider moral law that they invoke that isn't codified and no one can explain or describe, and they use this randomly and arbitrarily to suit themselves and suit their agenda. But what this has done is created a wider, and came back to the word moral. I don't know if you heard the term in when the banks were failing, and there's all sorts of drama in the financial crisis of 2008. There was a term used by the then Secretary of the Treasury, I think his name was Hank Paulson, as he called himself, and it was called moral hazard. That if you don't have penalties for failure and mismanagement, this is the banks he's talking about, if you don't have penalties for failure and mismanagement, these penalties could include bankruptcy, for example, then you create a moral hazard where people, bank executives, will behave in a way where they assume they won't be ever held accountable, that are always going to get their big fat bonuses, no matter how useless, incompetent or cavalier they've been in their behavior. Now, this moral hazard concept can be put sort of more widely and can apply in many different ways. It can be applied to, say, radical activist school teachers that will never get fired no matter how radical their activism is, but also can creep into other areas. For example, the mass-scale election fraud of the 2020 presidential election in the US still to this day hasn't been investigated. And certainly a lot of people I talk to in the public service elite and the legal elite and even judges and things like that, they say it's perfectly okay to rig an election provided you get the outcome you want. And if you get the outcome, like someone like Trump gets elected, that's a terrible thing, and we had a right to stop him by rigging the election. But wait a minute, if the people voted for him and election integrity was absolutely 100%, that surely the election integrity is the issue here. No, you silly man. That the outcome is the issue here, and if we've got to rig it, fix it, cheat, engage in skullduggery, then that's quite acceptable. Now, this is coming from senior public servants and judicial officers and all sorts of people like that, a deputy dean of a university, these people openly saying that rigging elections, the rules don't matter. We have to get the outcome that we want. And that outcome is a moral, an ideological moral outcome. And that's it. Now, once you go into the realms of moral ideology, then there are no rules. Nothing can be codified. And this is the area that the globalists have operated in very successfully to subvert and undermine the Western democracies, so that no Western democracy has a sovereign government anymore. Look at the government of Britain. They're a bunch of little fetch and carry flunky stooges for the globalists. Only in the last few days has the United States now got a sovereign government with President Trump in the White House. And that will shake up the world. But I wanted to again, concentrate on this idea of this moral hazard. The rules don't apply. Now, this was brought home, interestingly, I was helping someone I know do how to go about going to do online auctions and things like that. So now, for those who haven't done any of these online auctions, they list the auction a widget, and then people bid for the widget, and the highest bidder gets to buy the widget, and then you pay some sort of a commission to the auction house. That's their money there, and on it goes. So the widget there, widget X, and you bid, and now in some cases that the highest bidder may not win because the seller, the owner of the item who wants to sell it, might put on something called a reserve price. Now, this means that the minimum price has to be achieved before the item officially becomes for sale. So they may say, well, I've got a reserve, for example. They may say, well, I've got a reserve price of $99. So it's only when the bid is above $99 that it officially becomes for sale to the highest bidder. But not every item has a reserve. Some don't have a reserve. Now, but there's another factor involved now in this that took me by surprise, is that even though the item does not have a reserve price, the auction house can say, well, we think the item should have sold for $100, but the highest bid was $80. And so even though there was no reserve, there's no reserve price, so the $80 bid should have won, we can say that because it didn't make the price range that we think it should have, that we can refer it back to be bid on, auctioned again at the next auction on the following day or the following week or whatever it might be. So the highest bidder assumes they've won bought the item, but then actually we think the price should have been higher. But hold on a minute, the highest bidder is the highest bidder, and they've got no, well, I'm not really. Now, if you read the terms of their auction, if you bid, you agree to these terms, that sort of thing. There's it's a pretty strangled interpretation, but they effectively say that anytime we choose, we can just ignore the rules and do what we want. That's basically what it says. And if you, by bidding on any item, you accept these rules. Now, the rules are that there are no rules. So there's no clearly codified thing of, well, what constitutes a fair price or what constitutes what we think it should have been. Now, part of this is the auction house says to the seller, we think you're going to get $100 for your item. And if you don't get the $100, we have the right to put it back up for auction again the following week. Now, the highest bidder may have bid $99. Now, the auction house will go to the seller and say, look, the folks who own the item want to sell it in an auction. So, look, we got $99. Do you want to accept that? We think we might be able to get better. There was just a low turnout. Not many people came along to bid on that item, so we think you can get more later. So that's sort of what happens now. So they can just withdraw. We think we can get more money for that. It was just a slow day, and so we don't have to honour the highest bidder on this. Now that took me by surprise. Because if you've got if you want to put a reserve on the price, put a reserve on it. I've got no problem with that. If you want to put a price range on it and say, well, it's a conditional reserve based on that's fine too. But don't say the item's up for sale to the highest bidder when it's not. And that you can arbitrarily, unilaterally say, you know what? I thought I should get more money for that. So I'm just not going to want to honour to the highest bidder. The highest bidder can go and get stuffed, and I'm going to put it up for sale and hope for a better outcome next time. Now, this is not unique. And now I made an inquiry on this because I thought maybe they quite haven't understood it, or maybe there was meant to be a reserve but they didn't put it on there, or maybe there was another condition on the sale that they didn't declare on that actual item. Instead, buried deep in the small print, you've got it. But so there were two things I want to know. Well, why isn't the highest bidder getting it? If you wanted a reserve, why didn't you put it on there? And if you did have some other criteria, why not mention it or state it clearly on the? We find if we put a reserve price on something, we get fewer bids. Okay, fine. Well, all right. Then that's the reality you live with. Though, if the people, the people bidding and the public, if they decide they're not interested, then surely that's how it is. Why put a reserve on something, or why not say what the reserve is? say it has to be a minimum of $100 or $99 or whatever it is. But no, we think the reserve should be secret. We only tell people, bidders, after they've already met the reserve. Well, if that's what you want to do, but then you can't complain at the same time you don't get enough bidders. I can't see how you want to maintain both. Now it come to the matter of the highest bidder, them just arbitrarily saying, no, I think we can do better. Oh, well, we reserve that right. Okay, we'll state that on the item and state your criteria for it. We don't have to. Now, it went on that the guy, who was quite defensive, by the way, and thought, well, we have a right to do whatever we want, and how dare you question us attitude. So I thought, shit, they must work for the Biden administration. So anyway, so I sort of pushed a point in the inquiry and just asked him on the phone. I was trying to keep it as sort of gentle as possible because I wanted to get the information out of the guy. And but his response was that, look, I don't know what your problem is, Billy Bob. Look what's happening in Europe. If they don't like the election, they just ignore it or overturn it. If there's a referendum that doesn't go the way the people want, the boys downtown want, they just ignore it. And we'll have another referendum, tomorrow. So, that's how the world is. And what's your problem? I mean, I'm paraphrasing. He didn't use those exact words, but this was the idea that, as far as he was concerned, that's how things are these days. There's no such thing as a binding contract, and if you want to sort of get out of the contract or bullshit your way out of it or ignore it, overturn it or whatever, then you can do that, and you shouldn't be. Why should you be held accountable? I changed my mind, so what? Now, we find this more and more over the last, or probably 2 years, maybe a bit longer, but we found this in jobs that we projects that we work on, that there's that frequently someone will just pop out of the woodwork somewhere where we are. We've got a contract and all this, and so, oh yeah, look, we've changed our mind. Our business needs have changed, so we're going to thanks Billy Bob, if you can get your people off here in the next hour, we appreciate that. Now I'm a stickler for contracts, so no, you signed a contract and these people are constantly amazed that they've been held to account. Well, so what if I signed a contract? It suited me when I signed it. It doesn't suit me now, so I can just walk away from it. No. That's not how it works. And I'm careful to word the contract in such a way that that they're totally obligated. Now I always give an out clause to these people, saying, look, if you want to terminate the contract sort of with 5 minutes notice, then that's fine. You can do that, but you must pay us out. You must pay us out. So we've committed a month in advance to the people we've hired, and we're using as subcontractors. So you must pay us for that month. So you have to pay us out. You can get rid of us any tick of the clock. You can give us 1 second's notice if you want. That's fine, but you must pay us out. But they want to have both. No, we want to get rid of you with 1 second notice, but we don't want to have to pay you a cent. No, that's going to court. Now, sometimes there's legal wrangling and, the nasty letters, and they try and bullshit their way out of it, and I make a chase on it and that sort of thing. So in the end, they pay. But often they come to me, CEO, well, if I knew you were going to make such a fuss about it, I would have paid you. I would have kept you on to finish the work. I only did this because I thought I could get rid of you, not pay you, and then get someone cheaper. That's the only way. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much how it stacks up. I think I might be able to get a better deal if I have another go at this. And that's the attitude, again, we see in elections and we see in referenda and all these sort of things. And why I say the EU, if there's an election they don't like in any country, they'll just overturn it or ignore it, or pretend it didn't happen, or try some backroom shenanigans to in effect overturn it to all practical effect, or cite some obscure European law that wasn't adhered to. So this idea of we can just change our minds and we don't care, we'll have another go. So this has actually permeated at all levels. Now I see the same thing going on in it could be any helping a relative or friend of a relative buy, or kid of a relative actually, buying a car. I was astonished at how casual car dealers and various other people involved in car sales are. They can do the shake hand and agree and say, okay, you'll be back tomorrow to buy this, but in the meantime, someone came along and offered $100 more. So there's don't care, not interested. And this idea that you have the right to just walk away from any agreement that you think doesn't suit you, regardless whether you've got a signed contract and or not. And this is across the board in many ways here. And again, you're going to the US, the integrity of the US 2020 election. Who cares if there was millions upon millions of votes where there was no chain of custody or a broken chain of custody? Who cares if there's millions of votes where there's no signature verification or matching? Who cares? And this sort of thing. And it's diluted the moral code of rules, laws, adhering to contracts, living up to, and so on. And this, hopefully, the Trump administration can bring this back into the business and political discourse. But I was quite shocked at this auction house thinking, no, we don't have to give it to the highest bidder. We think we can do better going next time around, so we ignore it. Someone needs to take that to court. I mean, the auction house will lose. There's no way they can win it. But I haven't got the time or the energy or the inclination to drag those bums into court, but it needs to happen. You've been Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.